Hey guys, tonight we step gently onto sacred ground. Ancient texts whispering secrets about Jesus, hidden scrolls carrying forgotten truths and prophecies, quietly waiting for ears like yours. Imagine yourself walking down a dimly lit stone corridor, walls etched with divine symbols softly glowing with a heavenly luminescence. You're about to uncover revelations so profound you probably won't survive this, unless you've got wings or a direct line to the Almighty. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you are tonight, what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your fingers brush softly against the brittle parchment, aged and golden beneath your touch, as you unroll a scroll written centuries ago. You sense the weight of history settling around you, countless whispered prayers imbuing the very fibers of these ancient documents. These are not the scrolls of sermons you've heard in church or the common stories retold in Sunday school. These are the hidden prophecies, quiet truths that have gently waited through centuries, patiently biding their time for someone willing to listen, someone like you. As you lean closer, you can almost feel the ink pulsating softly, as if breathing gently in the quiet chamber where you now sit. Within these scrolls are secrets about Jesus that have been tucked away from the casual observer details, so subtle scholars themselves debate their true meaning. One of the scrolls before you whispers of a mysterious prophecy from Isaiah, seldom highlighted in mainstream teachings. It describes a Messiah who would carry not just the physical wounds of humanity, but a deeper spiritual anguish, an invisible sorrow, bearing silently the hidden pain of the world. Your mind wanders to the image of Jesus familiar from paintings and stories, serene and gentle, yet the scroll hints at something deeper, a profound vulnerability rarely acknowledged. Could it be possible that in his quietest moments, away from the crowds, Jesus felt an intimate, hidden grief, a burden he shared only with the unseen Father? Some theologians believe this hidden suffering connected deeply to his purpose, a quiet agony necessary to truly understand humanity's struggles. But others argue it points instead to a private compassion, a divine empathy that stretched beyond mere earthly sorrow. Turning gently to another scroll, you discover a curious fragment from an ancient apocryphal text, hinting at prophecies of Jesus far older than the familiar Gospels. Here Jesus appears not only as the expected Messiah, but as a cosmic presence foretold by civilizations far beyond Judea's borders. Your imagination drifts. Did these distant prophets gaze into the same stars, read divine messages in the same heavens as the wise men from the East? You can't help but smile softly at the thought. Maybe divine revelation isn't limited by geography or religion. Maybe it moves freely like a gentle wind, touching those who listen no matter who or where they are. It's a comforting thought, and you chuckle quietly, wondering if somewhere halfway around the globe someone else might be uncovering these very same truths tonight, connecting quietly with you through time and space. Another parchment catches your eye, describing a prophecy about Jesus so subtle it was nearly overlooked entirely. Hidden within verses scholars have studied endlessly. There's mention of the Messiah not just healing the sick, but gently whispering to nature itself, calming storms with a mere glance, healing not just humans, but restoring peace to a fractured creation. Imagine Jesus standing quietly at the shore, not shouting, but softly speaking into the wind, a picture of divinity so subtle, so gentle, that you feel calmer just picturing it. Yet theologians remain uncertain. Some believe these quiet miracles symbolize a deeper truth, a restoration of spiritual balance in the world itself, while others softly debate whether these actions simply demonstrate divine humility, a savior content to remain gentle and understated rather than overwhelming humanity with grand displays of power. Your eyes drift toward yet another scroll, this one softly glowing brighter than the rest. You feel drawn toward it, sensing something special, waiting patiently for your discovery. As you open it, the room seems to brighten gently around you, the air filling with the faintest scent of incense. Within its pages you find a prophecy few have ever spoken about, openly one describing a hidden aspect of Jesus' destiny, his quiet, eternal bond with angelic beings. Most of us know of the angels announcing his birth, but this prophecy speaks of angels continuously guiding him throughout life, gently whispering guidance, providing subtle comfort, invisible companions at his side, during times of loneliness and trial. A soft joke flickers in your mind. Perhaps Jesus never truly needed a guardian angel. Maybe the angels themselves quietly wondered how exactly they'd been chosen to watch over the divine Son. Yet scholars softly murmur disagreement. Some suggest this angelic companionship was purely symbolic, representing divine guidance accessible to everyone willing to listen carefully. Others argue softly that these unseen angels were literal companions, present during crucial moments, silently strengthening Jesus' resolve, comforting him when human companionship failed. You gently close the scroll, feeling its warmth linger on your fingertips, your heart quietly comforted by these hidden truths. There's something deeply reassuring in the idea that Jesus, too, experienced quiet moments of solitude, silent companionship from heavenly friends unseen by human eyes. You feel softly comforted, reminded that even in your quietest moments you might also have unseen companions, angels whispering gentle encouragement, silently guiding your path. Your eyes feel heavy, your breath deepening into calm, rhythmic waves, each scroll, leaving you more relaxed, more at peace. You know tonight has barely begun, yet already these gentle hidden truths have touched something deep inside you, softly guiding you toward sleep, carrying you gently toward dreams filled with quiet revelations. Rest easy now as we continue our gentle exploration, these quiet truths slowly unfolding, carrying you softly toward a night filled with calm divine dreams. The stars above you shift, not with chaos but with quiet precision, as though the heavens themselves are aligning to whisper something sacred. You blink slowly, finding yourself beneath a dark velvet sky. The stars glimmer like whispered promises, and then you see it. One star brighter than the rest, pulsing gently with gold-white fire hanging low in the east. It doesn't flicker. It watches. You've seen the stories, the Star of Bethlehem leading wise men across deserts bearing treasures and awe. But tonight you get to step closer. Feel the wind they felt. Hear the hush of midnight broken only by camel steps and murmured prayers. That star wasn't just a celestial GPS, it was a divine signal. Ancient texts suggest it may not have been a star at all. Some scholars wonder if it was a rare planetary alignment, Jupiter and Venus merging to form a singular radiant body. Others propose it was an angel appearing as light, guiding those pure enough to see. And then there are whispers from mystical traditions suggesting it was the Shekinah glory itself, a manifestation of God's presence wrapped in astral beauty. Whatever it was, you can feel it watching still. But here's where it gets gently strange. Hidden in old rabbinic writings, long buried in dusty corners of history, are notes on a prophecy not often told. One that speaks of a light to rise in the east, untouched by fire or moon, a signal that the long-awaited one would be born into the world, and the very fabric of reality would sigh in response. The night Jesus was born wasn't just a warm nativity scene. Something shifted in the unseen layers of the cosmos, a ripple of divine energy brushing past the veils between heaven and earth. Some say the star marked not just a birth, but a spiritual eruption, heaven leaking light into time. You imagine the Magi now educated, dignified yet humble before this wonder. They weren't Jewish. They weren't from the land of the prophets. Yet they knew. They saw the sign and obeyed. You chuckle quietly. Sometimes it's not the loudest preacher or most polished priest that hears heaven. It's the stargazer, the dreamer, the one who still looks up. And here's a thought that drifts like smoke. The journey of the wise men probably took months. They traveled through wild lands, across harsh terrain, sleeping under the same sky you look up at now. But they moved forward simply because of that one persistent light. No map, no sermons, just the soft pull of something greater. Tonight your heart might be like theirs, navigating questions, deserts, long roads, and still the same light pulses softly somewhere above your life, guiding without demanding. The divine doesn't shout, it beckons. One forgotten detail, nestled in ancient lore, rarely included in nativity retellings, is that some believe the star disappeared once the Magi arrived, as if its work was done, like a divine usher exiting the stage when the scene was set. It didn't need applause, it just needed to show the way. And the gifts they brought, gold, frankincense, myrrh, were more than ceremonial. They were prophetic symbols. Gold for kingship, frankincense for divinity, and myrrh for burial. Strange, isn't it, to present embalming oil to a newborn? But some traditions suggest they knew. Deep down, these men saw more than a child. They saw the sacrifice coming. You exhale slowly, not in sadness, but reverence. Even at the beginning, Jesus' path was painted with paradox, a baby born under a star meant for kings, yet destined to be pierced for the world. And that star, it saw it all. Others argue the light wasn't in the sky at all, but in the soul. That what the Magi followed was an inner knowing awakened by God's voice. That they weren't just chasing a star, but responding to divine intuition. You smile. Maybe it was both. A soft breeze moves through the room, or is it your mind, and you feel something sacred settle over you? That same divine presence that lit up the heavens now rests here, in the quiet of your night, like warm oil over your spirit. You realize something gently profound. The Star of Bethlehem didn't just shine once. It shines every time someone opens their heart to mystery, to movement, to the pull of something holy. And tonight, in the silence between your breaths, you are that seeker. You are the Magi watching the heavens, stepping into the unknown. Maybe you're not meant to understand it all. Maybe your role is simply to notice the light when it appears, to trust the pull of your soul, and to keep walking. And if a divine joke had to be made, well, here it is. God made the greatest royal announcement in history, not through royal messengers, but through celestial flair, a teenage mother, and desert mystics with star maps. Heaven has a sense of humor, a soft one. The star fades now, not because it's gone, but because it's done its job. It brought you here, to this place of soft faith glowing in the quiet. Your breathing slows again. The night feels deeper, your eyelids heavier, and the heavens, they still hum with mystery, waiting for the next seeker to look up and follow. The desert breeze brushes against your skin as you step into Nazareth, not the bustling streets filled with adult followers and miracles, but a quieter time, a hidden chapter. You hear the soft knock of hammer on wood, the laughter of children echoing down sun-warmed paths. The boy Jesus is here, not teaching in synagogues, not walking on water, but running barefoot, eyes wide with wonder. And if you listen closely, you'll find the stories hidden between verses. Miracles from a childhood mostly left unwritten. You've probably noticed the Gospels glide almost silently over Jesus' early years, from the manger to the temple at age 12, and then silence, for nearly 2 decades. But not all traditions stay quiet. In forgotten texts and whispered legends passed down in remote corners of early Christianity, stories bloom like desert flowers, brief, bright, and tender. One tale tells of Jesus molding sparrows out of clay as a young boy. His friends laugh. Then quietly he breathes upon them, and the clay birds flutter into the sky. A playful miracle, subtle and harmless. You imagine the other children's stunned mouths agape, wondering if they should clap, scream, or kneel. Scholars debate these stories. Some see them as charming folklore, devotional imagination, meant to bridge the silence in Scripture. Others, more mystically inclined, believe these childhood acts hint at a deeper truth, that divinity, even when young, cannot help but create, restore, and surprise. And then there's the tale of a boy falling from a roof while playing nearby. The village panics. Jesus walks calmly over, touches the child's hand, and he rises whole and unafraid. No crowds, no trumpet blast, just quiet compassion, a whisper of the healer he would become. You smile at the idea. Even in youth, Jesus might have carried his sacred mission not as pressure, but as presence. Not dramatic, but deeply intuitive, like knowing when a friend is sad before they say a word. That kind of awareness. Other traditions speak of young Jesus confronting injustice in miniature, scolding a merchant, cheating a widow, sharing his food with children who had none. Nothing flashy, just glimpses of a soul who already knew the weight of love and the cost of kindness. And maybe you chuckle here, imagining Mary trying to parent the Son of God. Jesus put that back. You're not supposed to multiply the figs just because you're still hungry. There's a theory, gentle and provocative, that Jesus' miracles weren't always conscious acts, that as a child he might have healed instinctively, the way we blink or breathe. A bandaged knee mends faster when he's near. A dying flower stands tall again after he walks past, not because he's showing off, but because divine life flows through him like water through a stream. Of course, not everyone agrees. Some theologians argue that Jesus deliberately held back his power until the time was right, that part of the incarnation meant living fully human even in restraint, that he chose silence over spectacle, Simplicity over signs. After all, how do you grow in wisdom, as Luke says, if you already know everything? And yet others point to those very words he grew in wisdom and stature as proof that the divine nature within him matured alongside his body. That even Jesus, in some mysterious way, experienced discovery. That the boy in Nazareth might have marveled at the stars just like you wondered about the Father's plan just like us. That maybe, just maybe, he once asked Mary, "Do you think God ever gets lonely?" You can almost hear her reply, can't you? Soft, warm, familiar, I think he made you so he wouldn't be. Another lesser-known tale speaks of Jesus calming a sudden storm that startled a group of shepherds. No crowd, no sermon, just a quiet moment of stillness, like a divine lullaby sung to the wind. The shepherds never spoke of it again, not out of fear, but reverence. Some things are too holy to retell. And here's a detail rarely noticed. Nazareth, his hometown, wasn't well regarded. In fact, one future disciple would scoff, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" But this little dusty town, it shaped the Son of God. He played in its alleys, memorized scripture in its synagogue, crafted furniture for its homes. The Savior of the world spent more time sanding wood than standing on mountaintops. Think about that. There's something wonderfully divine in that thought, that heaven doesn't rush, that greatness grows slowly hidden like roots beneath soil, that before Jesus walked on water, he first walked dusty roads to fetch water. Before he raised the dead, he raised tables. Before the crown of thorns, there were probably a few wooden splinters. You breathe a little deeper now, your heart steadying. Maybe your own life feels hidden sometimes, ordinary, quiet. But these years of Jesus' life remind you God does sacred work in silence. He grows kings in kitchens. He shapes destinies in sheds. And so tonight, in your own quiet space, you're a little like young Jesus held in unseen love, becoming something deeper than you can yet see. No spotlight, just slow unfolding. The world might not notice, but heaven does. You feel the shift again, not in the air, but in the time. The colors around you fade into the golden hue of Egyptian sunlight. A new scene rises, sand stretching endlessly beneath your feet. Warm wind curling around your robes. You are no longer in Nazareth. You walk the streets of ancient Egypt following a quiet family in exile, a young mother, a silent father, and a child carrying more than anyone around him can understand. This part of Jesus' life, the years in Egypt, is often left in a single breath. And they fled to Egypt. But have you ever wondered what happened there? Days turned into years. A whole chapter of Jesus' life veiled in mystery, hidden among pyramids, forgotten temples, and the whispers of a foreign land. And tonight you get to walk there, quietly, like a shadow trailing behind divinity in disguise. Some early Christian writings suggest the Holy Family stayed in Egypt for up to 4 years, not as tourists or noble guests, but as fugitives. Think of it. The creator of the universe tucked away in a humble Egyptian village far from prophecy, far from the temple, yet still fully in control. You glance toward the child Jesus playing in the dust, humming a tune known only in heaven, and wonder, what did Egypt awaken in him? The land itself holds deep spiritual echoes. Egypt had always been a place of paradox, of oppression, and refuge, darkness, and deliverance. Abraham visited Egypt. Joseph rose to power there. Moses led the people out. And now Jesus, the one who would fulfill all of these stories, returns not to lead a rebellion, but to rest, to learn to wait. Some mystical traditions say this wasn't a coincidence at all, that the flight to Egypt was part of a divine cycle, Jesus symbolically retracing Israel's steps. Just as Israel came out of Egypt to begin their covenant journey, Jesus too would emerge from it to begin his. The parallel is quiet but powerful. You feel it like a soft pulse beneath the narrative, patterns, prophecies, promises wrapped in footprints. There are apocryphal accounts, rarely read, sometimes debated, that describe strange things happening during their time there. Statues of idols toppling as the Christ child passed, springs of water bubbling up in the desert, sick villagers healed by the presence of this boy with stars in his eyes. You pause. Could it be that even as a refugee, Jesus brought quiet restoration to a land haunted by centuries of spiritual unrest? Some say the temples grew silent, that priests of forgotten gods paused mid-prayer, confused by a sudden warmth in the air. Not fear, but reverence. as if Egypt itself sensed the presence of a greater light cloaked in humility. But not everyone agrees. Many theologians warn against drawing too much from these stories, calling them poetic rather than historical. And yet, even poetry has roots. And perhaps in a land built on symbolism and dreams, Jesus' presence truly did awaken something deep and ancient, something that even the stones remembered. You smile gently at one story how local children in Egypt were drawn to Jesus playing with him by the riverside. One legend speaks of him touching a withered tree, causing it to blossom overnight. The next day, the village named the spot Tree of the Savior, and some claimed it gave shade that felt different, cooler, safer. You imagine sitting beneath it now, the bark warm beneath your back, the child beside you humming. Even in exile, Jesus made things grow. And then there's Mary and Joseph, so often seen only as background figures. But here, they are protectors, spiritual anchors. Can you imagine Joseph's prayers at night, knowing the child he guarded could summon angels if he chose, yet still needed his protection? Or Mary carrying the weight of angelic promises and whispered prophecy, trying to keep her child's sandals tied and his spirit nourished? You let out a soft laugh, picture young Jesus asking questions at dinner. Why are stars shaped like that? Or do camels dream? And Mary answering patiently, maybe sneaking in a lullaby, passed down from her mother, one that now wraps itself around your ears like a hush before sleep. Egypt changed them. It softened the edges. It taught them patience, trust, silence. And when the time came when the threat had passed, they returned home, quietly, without fanfare. But something had shifted. The boy who left Nazareth returned with eyes that had seen foreign gods fall and hidden suffering healed. There's one final curiosity tucked into an old Eastern manuscript. It says that during their final days in Egypt, a wise old priest approached Mary and said, "This child will walk into death, but death will not hold him." She wept not from fear, but because she already knew, and Jesus, he simply held her hand. You feel that same hand now metaphorically reaching across time. A presence not commanding, but comforting. Tonight you walk with the exiled son, the one who carried glory through border crossings, the one who whispered life into cracked ground and never once demanded to be worshipped. Egypt fades now, its gold and stone retreating into soft shadow, but its echoes remain, in your breath, in your heartbeat, in the quiet places of your story that seem like exile, but are actually formation. You're not hidden, you're being prepared. The morning sun spills across wood shavings and smooth cedar beams. You're back in Nazareth, not walking the dusty paths now, but standing in the half-shadow of a quiet workshop. You hear the steady rhythm of hand against wood, measured calm. This isn't a miracle in motion. It's something simpler, something sacred. Jesus is at the workbench. He lifts a board, runs his fingers along the grain, and begins shaping it with patience only heaven could teach. The scent of olive oil and sawdust fills the air. And for the next few years of his hidden life, this is the Messiah's world chisels nails and the quiet humility of labor. It's strange, isn't it? That for all the power he carried, for all the divine fire in his bones, Jesus chose to spend most of his earthly years building tables and mending doors, not leading armies, not writing scrolls, just shaping timber slowly, tenderly, like the world he came to redeem. Some theologians call this the silent preparation. Others refer to it as redemptive waiting. But you, tonight, you feel the holy weight of it in your chest. This wasn't wasted time. This was sacred groundwork. Because when God chooses to save the world, he starts by showing us how to carry burdens, how to serve without applause, how to carve beauty from what others throw away. You watch him now. He doesn't rush. He's not distracted. He works like someone who sees beyond the surface, who understands that every splintered board can become a blessing if handled with care. You think about your own life, your own delays, those seasons where it felt like nothing moved. But maybe those weren't delays. Maybe they were workshops. Here's a soft joke. If Jesus was making tables, imagine the irony when someone later flipped them in the temple. I built those, he might have whispered, half smiling. But in truth, every beam he touched seemed to echo something eternal. There's an old belief found in early Christian oral traditions that Jesus crafted yokes for oxen, shaping them to fit perfectly across the shoulders of each animal. Not too tight, not too loose, just right. And suddenly his words later in life take on new weight. My yoke is easy, my burden is light." He wasn't just being poetic, he was speaking from experience. And some say he made cradles for newborns. Think about that. The one who entered the world in a manger building places of rest for other infants. He who had no place to lay his head, creating rest for others with his own hands. That's the kind of quiet love that doesn't make headlines but shakes heaven. Of course, not all agree on these details. Some scholars argue we project too much into the silence, that Jesus' carpentry may have been basic, simple repairs, nothing remarkable. But even in simplicity, there is sanctity. Even in the smallest nail-driven straight, there is precision presence. And then there's Joseph, often forgotten in the grand story, but not tonight. You see him standing beside Jesus, passing him tools, nodding with quiet approval. Some traditions say Joseph died before Jesus' public ministry began, which means these years in the workshop were also years of goodbye, silent ones. A father teaching his son how to build and how to let go. Can you feel the tenderness in that, their conversations full of both purpose and peace? Maybe Joseph never saw the miracles, but he helped raise the one who would perform them. Maybe the holiest thing he ever did was sharpen a blade, fix a window, and whisper, "You did good work today, son." The sound of the saw fades as you lean against the doorway. You realize something profound. Jesus didn't come to escape humanity. He came to inhabit it fully, even its monotony, even its routine. There's a story quietly passed down that during one summer storm, a widow came, panicked, to the shop, her roof leaking, her table rotting. Everyone else was too busy, but Jesus took her hand, walked through the rain, and stayed till her house was whole. Not because it was grand, but because it was hers. And so tonight, as you lie there, maybe you think about your own tools, your daily grind, the things you build even when no one sees. And maybe for the first time in a long while, you realize that Jesus has walked your pace, held your exhaustion, and knows how to carry the things you think you have to handle alone. In the flicker of a lantern, you glimpse a workbench with a project mid-build. Something unfinished. That's you. And he's still working, not rushing, not giving up. Just steadily shaping your spirit one stroke at a time. Nazareth was never a detour, it was the foundation. And you're not forgotten, you're being crafted. The scent of parchment and desert herbs fills your lungs now, and the scenery changes once again. Gone is the dusty workshop. You walk a winding path toward a quiet settlement, hidden in the hills near the Dead Sea. Palm trees sway in the distance, and a soft wind carries the echoes of ancient prayers whispered into caves. You've arrived at Qumran, home of the Essenes, a mysterious Jewish sect, known for their fierce purity, strict communal life, and some believe their quiet connection to Jesus. You've likely heard of Pharisees and Sadducees, but the Essenes, they lived apart. They rejected temple corruption, withdrew from the noise of city life, and gave themselves to prayer, prophecy, and the study of sacred scrolls. These were people of silence and discipline, and some modern scholars whisper, was Jesus at least for a time one of them? It's a theory debated with gentle passion. The Gospels never mention the Essenes by name, but their teachings echo like distant bells in Jesus' voice. Their emphasis on inner purity, their focus on baptism, their prophecies of a coming Messiah, their radical call to abandon wealth and live communally. Does any of this sound familiar? Some early historians even claimed Jesus was Essene in spirit, if not in form. They point to the similarities between the Essene texts and the Sermon on the Mount. Others go further, suggesting that Jesus may have studied with them during his missing years, that the wilderness shaped his understanding of the kingdom, not of this world. But not everyone agrees. Many theologians caution against blending traditions too quickly. They remind us that Jesus walked his own path, that while his teachings may have overlapped, he ultimately went far beyond any sect or label. After all, he ate with tax collectors and sinners, hardly something an Essene would dare to do. And yet, the connections shimmer softly. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in the 1940s near this very place, revealed texts astonishingly rich in messianic prophecy. Some spoke of not one but two messiahs, a priestly figure and a warrior king. Some mention a mysterious teacher of righteousness who would be persecuted and rejected only to return in glory. It's not hard to see why these writings have stirred the imaginations of spiritual seekers ever since. You imagine Jesus walking along the cliffs here, perhaps, before his baptism, watching waves crash below, listening to the wind speak through reeds. Did he learn from the Essenes? Did they recognize him? Or did they miss him entirely? Eyes too focused on their scrolls to see that the word itself had come alive in their midst. One quiet story from an obscure manuscript tells of a young man who came to Qumran, asked no questions but listened deeply. He helped in the gardens, served at meals, and prayed with tears. Some believed him odd. Others felt peace in his presence. And one elderly teacher reportedly said, "That boy carried silence like a crown." It makes you wonder, could divinity truly blend so seamlessly into humility that even the most devoted failed to see it? You step into a cave now, cool, quiet, alive with memory. Here is where some of the scrolls were stored, protected from time. As you kneel, you run your fingers across the edge of a stone shelf and you feel something. Not a vision, not a voice, but a knowing. That truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits. And Jesus, he was never in a hurry. He let his wisdom steep like incense in the silence of years. That same slow wisdom is shaping you now. The Essenes believed in preparing the way. They bathed daily, read the scriptures aloud, and waited for the light to dawn. When John the Baptist emerged, wild-haired, thunder-voiced, many think he came from this very community. And Jesus sought him out. Not because he needed cleansing, but because it marked a turning point, from hidden to seen, from quiet growth to thunderous purpose. You smile. Of all the places Jesus could have launched his ministry, he started in the wilderness among outcasts and rebels. It wasn't a political move. It was personal, symbolic, sacred. One lesser-known curiosity found in a damaged scroll fragment speaks of a figure who teaches not with swords or laws, but with breath that warms cold hearts. A poetic description and perhaps a glimpse of Jesus before the world saw him clearly. You feel the cave, dim now, shadows returning to their resting places. But something lingers, a hush, a reverence, a sense that the deepest teachings don't come from scrolls or scholars, but from those who dare to live unseen, preparing the way for others to see. Jesus, whether or not he ever bore the title of saint, knew what it meant to live hidden, intentional, devoted. And now you know too. Maybe your life has felt set apart. Maybe you've wondered why the world doesn't see you yet. Maybe, just maybe, you're not behind. You're being prepared. You stand at the cave's mouth, the desert stretching wide before you. The same sun that warmed Jesus' face now kisses your skin. The same wind that carried ancient prayers now brushes against your cheeks. And the silence, it's not empty, it's sacred. The air thickens with expectancy as you step onto rocky ground surrounded by reeds and the low sound of rushing water. The Jordan River flows steadily beside you, ancient, gentle, and alive with memory. Ahead stands a man clothed in camel's hair, his voice a gravelly blend of thunder and grace. This is John the Baptist. But tonight, you're not just here to witness a baptism. You're here to feel a vision, one so powerful, it trembled inside the bones of prophecy. John isn't preaching for applause. He's not here for popularity. He's a voice crying out in the wilderness, just like Isaiah foretold. And yet tonight he carries something you've never heard before. Something almost no one talks about, a private hidden vision of Jesus' mission, one John may have received long before the crowds ever gathered. Some early Christian traditions suggest that before Jesus arrived at the river, John already knew who he truly was, not because of family rumors or whispered tales, but through divine revelation. There are records rarely read aloud that speak of a dream John had in the wilderness, a lamb glowing with celestial fire walking into darkness, followed by multitudes, some laughing, some weeping. And above it all, a voice whispered, "He will go where no priest dares." John awoke trembling, unsure what the vision meant. But when Jesus approached the river that day, it all made sense. You turn now and there he is. Jesus, eyes calm, as still water, feet dusty from miles walked in silence. He meets John's gaze and neither speaks for a moment. The river hushes. Even the birds seem to pause. This isn't just the beginning of ministry, it's a collision of timelines. The old prophets and the new covenant meeting in a single heartbeat. John hesitates. "I need to be baptized by you," he murmurs, voice shaking. But Jesus, gently smiling, says, "Let it be so now." But why baptism? Why would the sinless be cleansed? Theologians have debated this for centuries. Some say it was to model obedience. Others suggest it marked his identification with humanity, an act of solidarity, not necessity. And then there are those who believe something deeper occurred in that water. That as Jesus entered the river, he absorbed the silent weight of all who had ever stood in it before him, repenting, grieving, hoping. When Jesus rose from the water, the heavens opened and a voice said, "This is my Son, in whom I am well pleased." But tonight you catch a detail often missed. It wasn't the voice alone that confirmed him. It was a dove, a soft-winged symbol of peace descending like breath. In Jewish tradition, the dove represents the spirit hovering over creation in Genesis, and here it hovers again over the new creation being born in Jesus. Some ancient rabbinic texts suggest doves only rest where there is complete shalom, peace without fracture, which means in that moment, heaven recognized something in Jesus that went beyond calling. It recognized completeness. There's a lesser-known teaching hidden in the writings of a 3rd century desert mystic, claiming that John wept after baptizing Jesus not out of sadness, but awe. He reportedly whispered to a student later, "His presence turned the water gold." You smile gently at that. Maybe not literal gold, but something changed. And not just in Jesus, in John, in the river, in the soil. The divine had stepped fully into the current of humanity, and the world would never flow the same. Here's a gentle laugh for your heart tonight. Imagine the look on people's faces when John said, "Behold the Lamb of God." Lamb, not lion, not conqueror, not thunderbolt-wielding savior. A lamb, soft, vulnerable, willing. That was John's true vision. Not of a Messiah come to crush Rome, but one sent to cradle brokenness, to walk willingly into death. And he saw it long before others did. Theologians wrestle with this. Was John always certain? After all, in prison later, he sends word to ask Jesus, "Are you the one?" But maybe that's the beauty of it. Even prophets question. Even visionaries wonder. Faith, after all, isn't certainty, it's trust in motion. And you've stood by the river now. You've seen the skies open. You've heard the whisper of heaven naming the beloved. Maybe you needed this reminder tonight, not just of Jesus' identity, but your own. Because if God's voice spoke once, it still speaks. And it says you're not forgotten. You're not wandering. You're walking towards something holy. The water beside you shimmers now, moonlight dancing across its surface. And you feel a peace, unlike anything else, a sense that your own heart has passed through something sacred, something that has washed away the old and welcomed the new. The dove still circles overhead just out of sight, and the voice, it speaks not in thunder, but in warmth. You are mine. You find yourself now beneath a vast open sky, the sun softening behind distant hills. Dust swirls at your feet as crowds gather around a quiet man seated on a rock. His voice isn't loud, yet every word wraps around the listeners like wind around trees. This is Jesus, not the child, not the carpenter, not the silent student. This is the teacher, the one who speaks in stories that shake kingdoms. But tonight, you're not here for parables you already know. Tonight, you lean in close to discover the hidden meanings behind his miracles, those moments of divine disruption that have been told and retold, yet still hold secrets softly tucked within them. Take, for example, the first miracle, the one at the wedding in Cana. You know the story, water becomes wine. But listen again. Why begin with something so quiet? Not healing a leper, not raising the dead, just saving a celebration. Some scholars suggest that this miracle wasn't just about wine, but timing. The jars Jesus used weren't ordinary. They were ceremonial, used for purification rituals. So when Jesus turned that water into wine, he wasn't just performing a trick. He was gently suggesting that something new was replacing something old. A covenant shift whispered beneath the music and laughter of a wedding. And the wine better than what came before, that's no accident. It's a signature from the divine, a quiet symbol that what Jesus brings is richer, fuller, and yes, worth waiting for. Now consider the feeding of the 5,000. A crowd of hungry people, 5 loaves, 2 fish. He blesses, breaks, and multiplies. But the deeper miracle isn't just in the multiplication, it's in the structure. Did you ever notice he tells them to sit in groups, to rest, to be still? He doesn't rush. He invites organization, peace, order from chaos, like Genesis all over again. Some early writers reflecting on this moment believe the miracle began the moment Jesus looked at the crowd with compassion, not when he broke the bread. That his gaze alone began to feed their spirits before their stomachs ever caught up. You smile at that. A savior who nourishes with his presence before the provision even arrives. And then there's the healing of the blind man with mud. Jesus spits on the ground, makes clay, places it on the man's eyes, and tells him to wash. It sounds strange, earthy, almost crude, but think deeper. In Genesis, God forms man from dust. So here Jesus isn't just healing, he's recreating. Reforming eyes from the same substance used to form Adam. And the water he's told to wash in the pool of Siloam, whose name means sent. A quiet nod that the one doing the healing is sent from above, and that the healing itself is a commissioning. Some theologians even suggest that this miracle was layered in symbolism: blindness, representing spiritual ignorance, clay representing creation, and washing representing revelation. A full transformation, not just physical. There's a lesser-known curiosity too. In one miracle, Jesus heals 10 lepers, but only one returns to thank him. Jesus notices, not out of ego, but because gratitude in its purest form is healing too. And the one who returned, a Samaritan. Someone outsiders didn't expect to get it right. But grace isn't predictable. It breaks social rules quietly, like wind slipping through locked doors. You chuckle softly. It's as if Jesus is always one step ahead, not just healing, but teaching through healing. Not just showing power, but revealing identity. His and ours. There's another layer often overlooked: the way Jesus never performed miracles the same way twice. Sometimes he speaks, sometimes he touches, sometimes he says nothing at all. Why? One theory: he knew every heart. What worked for one soul would not work for another. His methods weren't formulas, they were love-tailored precisely for each person. That's divine attention. That's holy intimacy. A gentle laugh rises as you think of the time Jesus told Peter to catch a fish, and inside there'd be a coin to pay their taxes. It's like heaven saying, I see your mundane problems too. And yes, I can fix them with a fish if I want. But perhaps the greatest hidden miracle wasn't in a storm stilled or a body healed. It was in Jesus himself, how he never hurried, never panicked, never lacked compassion, even when exhausted. That constant flow of peace, that was miraculous. There's a beautiful line in a 2nd century gospel fragment that reads, "He walked among them, and time forgot its pace." You feel that now. Time slowing. The stories unfolding not as fables, but as pulses of truth, gentle and alive. Jesus wasn't just a miracle worker, he was the miracle. And so are you in ways you may not yet see. The moments in your life that feel small or ordinary may one day shine with a holy glow, like jars filled with quiet water, waiting to be turned to joy. You close your eyes now. The crowds fade. The teacher's voice lingers like warmth in the chest. You understand something: his miracles weren't interruptions of nature. They were restorations, reminders, whispers of the world as it was meant to be. And it's still being restored, one soul at a time. You now walk into the hush of early morning, where the streets are still and the horizon glows with the softest gold. A woman moves quietly through the city's edges, her steps unhurried but full of intention. You follow her not out of curiosity, but reverence. This is Mary Magdalene. And tonight, you're here not for controversy, but for clarity. For the gentle unveiling of a truth long buried beneath centuries of misunderstanding. You've probably heard many stories about her, some of them dramatic, many of them distorted. But in this quiet space, let's meet her not as a scandal, not as a footnote, but as what she truly was, one of Jesus's most spiritually attuned followers. Start here: she was not a prostitute. That idea, though widely spread, was a historical misreading, born from a sermon given centuries after her death. The scriptures never say it. What they do say, however, is more powerful: that Jesus cast out 7 demons from her. 7. A symbolic number of totality. Not just a physical healing, but a spiritual liberation so complete it rewrote the trajectory of her life. And what did she do with that freedom she followed? Not just in crowds, not just in comfort, but in constancy. When others fled, she remained. At the cross, when even the boldest disciples scattered, Mary stood. Not because she had no fear, but because love had rooted itself so deeply in her spirit, it had no room left for retreat. There are whispers, ancient, often apocryphal, that Mary understood something about Jesus no one else quite grasped. That while others waited for thrones or revolutions, she listened for resurrection. Some early Gospels call her the apostle to the apostles, and it was she, not Peter, not John, who first saw the risen Christ. You imagine that moment now, the garden still cool with morning dew, her tears blurring vision, the tomb empty. A voice calling her name not thunderously, not dramatically, but gently. Mary. That one word broke the silence of history. There's a lesser-known text, the Gospel of Mary, preserved in fragmented form, where she recounts teachings from Jesus, given privately teachings about inner peace, detachment from fear, and a soul's journey through realms beyond sight. Some scholars see these as echoes of early Christian mysticism. Others dispute their authenticity. But regardless, the tone rings familiar, gentle, wise, not flashy. Just like him. What's clear is that Mary Magdalene had a closeness to Jesus few others experienced. And not in the way fiction or modern speculation often suggests. Her intimacy was spiritual, deep, rooted in understanding rather than possession. While others saw a miracle worker, she saw a teacher who saw her. And isn't that what so many of us crave to be seen fully? Not just for our strengths or struggles, but for the sacred spark within us. That's what Jesus offered her. And she in return offered unwavering presence. You pause now at a stone bench in this imagined city, the wind curling softly past. You can feel her presence even now, steadfast, quiet, misunderstood but unshaken. There's a beautiful tradition, mostly oral, passed down in some Eastern communities. It says that after the resurrection, Mary spent her life teaching, quietly nurturing faith in small house gatherings, never seeking acclaim. That her words were less fire, more flame, slow-burning truth that warmed hearts over time. You can almost hear her voice now. He is alive. Not only in the tombs we empty, but in the silence we enter. Find him there. A small joke flickers in your mind. Maybe if Mary had been the one running the early church, we'd all meditate more and argue less. Some theologians today believe she represents the contemplative side of discipleship devotion through presence, not position. That while Peter built the structure, Mary held the soul. And maybe we need both. You begin to see her not just as a historical figure, but as a mirror. A symbol of the part of you that refuses to look away from pain, that stays near the cross when others escape it, and that still dares to believe in light before dawn breaks. There's something liberating in that, because maybe you've been misunderstood too. Labeled wrongly. Misread by those who only know a fraction of your story. But like Mary, your truth isn't determined by public opinion. It's shaped by divine encounter. And that encounter is still offered whispered in gardens in grief, in the gentle calling of your name when you feel most lost. Mary didn't preach in synagogues. She didn't write epistles. But her presence became the thread that quietly tied despair to hope, death to life. You close your eyes now, the soft footsteps fading down the street. You know she's still walking, not just in history, but in you. And her lesson lingers. Stay near, even when it's hard, especially when it's quiet. That's where resurrection begins. The sun begins to lower behind hills the color of old parchment. Shadows stretch long across the landscape as you follow a narrow path toward the edge of a garden, a place where the air carries both stillness and tension. You sense it before you see it. The weight of unseen watchers, the hush before something sacred unfolds. Tonight you've entered the realm where angels walk without fanfare. Throughout the Gospels, angels appear like sparks, sudden, brilliant, and brief, announcing births, warning travelers, rolling stones. But their roles in Jesus' life go deeper than a few scattered moments. Much deeper. And tonight, you're here to uncover the soft traces they left, those hidden interventions, when heaven stood just behind the curtain, quietly shaping the story you thought you knew. You remember the nativity angel, of course. Do not be afraid, it said. But what about the angels during the silent years? During his adolescence, his carpentry tradition doesn't name them, but early mystics believed Jesus was never without angelic company. That behind every decision, every moment of solitude, there were unseen beings watching, protecting, and yes, learning. There's a line in an ancient Syriac hymn that claims the angels did not teach him, but they marveled. Imagine that. Celestial beings who watched creation unfold, pausing in awe before the carpenter of Nazareth as he gently bandaged a child's scraped knee. You almost laugh, imagine being an archangel, and still not understanding how kindness can make heaven tremble. One major moment of angelic intervention is clearer after Jesus' baptism as he wandered into the wilderness, 40 days, no food, no company, except one line tucked into the Gospel of Mark, and angels ministered to him. What did that look like? Was it sustenance, silent presence? Perhaps just the reassurance that the Father had not forgotten him. Theologians love to speculate. Some say the angels brought food. Others believe their presence was spiritual, calming the soul more than the body. And still others argue it was metaphor that even in the most divine life, comfort often comes quietly unseen. But you imagine Jesus alone among stones and wild beasts, feeling the brush of wings near his shoulders. A presence not removing the trial, but witnessing it. Not fixing the pain, but refusing to let him endure it alone. And then there's the Garden Gethsemane, that trembling night when even the moon seemed to hold its breath. Jesus face to the ground, sweating blood, crying out in agony. And again, scripture whispers, an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. You pause there. What does it mean to strengthen the Son of God? Some say it was a divine charge, a whisper to stay the course. Others see it as emotional presence, the comfort of being seen in your most vulnerable hour. But there's also a tender idea that maybe the angel didn't come to give strength, but to receive something, to witness the fullness of divine surrender, the Creator undone, not by weakness, but by choice. Maybe that angel fell to its knees too. A soft, sacred joke slips into your mind. The only creature who ever commanded angels spent more time comforting others than commanding armies. That's the paradox of power in Jesus' heaven at his fingertips, but always choosing compassion. There's a story rarely told found in a 4th century Ethiopian manuscript. It tells of an angel who once tried to stop Jesus from heading toward Jerusalem, begging him not to walk into death. And Jesus, smiling sadly, said, "Would you deny me the joy of finishing what was started?" The angel, they say, wept all the way to Golgotha. And what about the resurrection? You likely recall the angels at the tomb, one sitting atop the stone, one inside glowing like lightning. But did you notice what they said? Why do you look for the living among the dead? A line that echoes through centuries. Not just a statement, but a challenge. The angels weren't just announcing a miracle, they were redirecting perception, saying, look higher, look forward, look beyond. And there's one final mystery tucked into the story of Jesus' ascension. As he rises, the disciples stare into the clouds stunned. And again, angels appear. Why do you stand looking into heaven, as if to say your mission has begun? You don't need to see his feet to follow his footsteps. You breathe deeply now, the night air settling around you. You feel them too, don't you, the angels? Not in flaming chariots or trumpet blasts, but in the quiet moments when you needed strength you didn't know you had. In the peace that came with no explanation. In the guidance that arrived just in time. Scripture calls them ministering spirits, servants of light. But they're more than symbols. They are reminders that you are never alone. That even Jesus in his most sacred hours was not left abandoned. And so neither are you. Maybe you've never seen wings or heard voices, but still, you've been held. You lean against a tree now, listening to the wind stir leaves above. The garden grows quiet again. The angels have returned to stillness, but their presence lingers, not to impress, not to dazzle, but to stay near, just like grace does. The wind has changed. It carries a colder weight now, not cruel but inevitable. You're walking through a narrow alley, the stone walls cool against your fingertips. You hear footsteps, yours and someone else's. Tonight you follow a man who has become the most misunderstood character in the gospel story, Judas Iscariot. You hesitate, don't you? Even saying his name tastes like betrayal. But tonight in this quiet hour, we're not rushing to judge. We're listening gently, deeply to the mystery he carries. Because what if his story isn't as simple as villainy? What if buried beneath centuries of condemnation, there's a divine complexity few have dared to explore? Judas wasn't a stranger. He was chosen, trusted. He walked the same roads, shared the same bread, heard the same parables. He saw miracles. He laughed when Jesus laughed. He probably helped gather the leftover bread after the feeding of the 5,000. Imagine that his hands carrying fragments of abundance before they ever carried coins. So what went wrong? Most assume it was greed, 30 pieces of silver, a cold transaction. But scholars across centuries have debated this. Some argue Judas wasn't driven by money, but disillusionment. That he expected Jesus to start a revolution, overthrow Rome, establish a kingdom with swords, not sermons. And when Jesus kept talking about surrender and sacrifice, Judas's hope soured into frustration. Others suggest Judas wasn't trying to destroy Jesus but force his hand. That by handing him over, he thought he might push Jesus into revealing his divine power publicly. A mistaken strategy, not malice. A gamble that cost everything. There's a haunting passage in Matthew where after the betrayal, Judas returns the silver saying, "I have betrayed innocent blood." Then in deep despair, he ends his life. You sit with that for a moment, not to excuse, but to understand, to feel the tragedy fully. A softer voice in ancient theology, especially among some early Christian sects, suggests Judas's role was necessary, that someone had to set the events in motion. One 2nd century text even frames Judas as obeying Jesus' own private request. "You will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me." A cryptic line hotly contested. Some say it's heresy, others, a doorway into a deeper mystery. Did Jesus know all along? The Gospels suggest yes. He said, "One of you will betray me." And yet, he still washed Judas's feet, still shared bread with him, still called him friend in the garden. Can you feel the weight of that word, friend? Not accuser, not traitor, friend. That perhaps is the most Christ-like act of all, to be fully aware of betrayal and still respond with gentleness. You glance up now and see Judas alone under a fig tree, his head in his hands. He's not counting coins. He's unraveling. He's remembering every miracle, every teaching, every moment of peace. And he's realizing what he's done not just to Jesus, but to himself. Theology wrestles here. Some say Judas was damned eternally. Others wonder if in his final moments grace still reached for him, that the same Jesus who forgave those nailing him to the cross might have also whispered, "Even you, Judas." There's a soft joke here hidden like a tear behind a smile. If Jesus can forgive Peter for denying him 3 times, maybe he has more than one invitation for redemption. Maybe grace is far more outrageous than we think. You walk now through olive trees, Gethsemane again. The betrayal hasn't happened yet, but you feel its echo coming. The kiss, the signal, the swords drawn, and still. Jesus doesn't run. He steps forward. You remember what he said earlier that night, "The one who dips his bread with me." In ancient Jewish culture, sharing the same dish was a sign of intimacy, of honor. Jesus wasn't exposing Judas in that moment. He was extending one last gesture of closeness. "I see you. I still love you." It wasn't just a prediction, it was a plea. Some believe Judas represents more than a man. He's a symbol of what happens when good intentions become twisted by fear, when impatience replaces trust, when control overtakes surrender. And maybe you felt that too, moments when you tried to force God's hand, not out of rebellion but desperation. But here's the hidden truth: betrayal didn't break the story, it fulfilled it. Jesus didn't stop Judas because the story needed a door, and heartbreak often opens the way to resurrection. You sit with that thought as the stars brighten above the garden. It's uncomfortable, yes, but honest, and somehow comforting. If even betrayal was woven into the redemption plan, then your own mistakes, your failures, regrets, losses might also be threads in the tapestry. You're not outside the story, you're inside grace. And Judas, whatever judgment history holds you, whisper a quiet prayer for him tonight. Because if Jesus called him friend, then who are we to say otherwise? The wind stirs through the olive leaves. The night is growing darker, but you're not afraid. You've seen now, even in the deepest shadows, God does not abandon, He embraces. The sky is heavier now. Not with clouds, but with the quiet weight of something about to break. You walk slowly into a garden dimly lit by moonlight, Gethsemane. The air here doesn't move much. It lingers still and thick, as if even the wind is holding its breath. And there just ahead you see him, Jesus, alone. The disciples are nearby, but asleep. You hear their gentle snoring, the soft rustle of robes as they shift on the ground. They don't know what's coming. Not really, but he does, and still he stays. Tonight we don't just watch this moment. We enter it. We listen to what isn't written, the whispered prayers between the lines, the sacred sorrow few talk about. The Garden of Gethsemane wasn't just a pit stop before betrayal, it was the battlefield before the cross. And what Jesus faced here was more than fear. It was the full pressure of obedience pressing down like a stone. The Gospels record his words, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. And then, Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." But those are just the lines we hear. What about the silence between them? What about the tears the disciples didn't see, or the questions he dared not speak aloud? There's an ancient Christian tradition quietly preserved in Eastern monastic circles that suggests Jesus may have whispered the names of every person he came to save during those hours. That he saw not just the cross, but you. That somewhere between "not my will" and "but yours be done," your name passed across his lips like a breath. And there's more. Some early writings claim Jesus fell not once, but multiple times to the ground. Each collapse a physical echo of the spiritual weight crushing him. Not fear of pain, but grief. Grief for what must be lost before redemption can rise. You walk a little closer now and you can almost hear it, the sound of his breath. Shaky, labored, divine. A soft joke flickers in your mind, one whispered only in reverence. This was the only night the angels wanted to intervene without being asked. In fact, one gospel tells us that an angel did appear to strengthen him. But notice he still suffered, still wept. Strength didn't erase the sorrow. It held him through it. And maybe that's what you need to remember tonight. Strength doesn't always look like power. Sometimes it looks like trembling, but staying. There's a lesser-known story shared among desert fathers in the 5th century that says a great silence fell over all of heaven during Gethsemane, that not even the seraphim sang. Because for the first time in eternity, the sun was choosing to be separated from the light he had never left. That's what the cup was, not just death, but distance. For the first and only time, Jesus would feel what we feel: emptiness, abandonment, the ache of silence from heaven, and he drank that cup, voluntarily. You sit now beside one of the olive trees. Its bark is worn smooth with time, its roots deep and tangled. You wonder if it remembers, if creation itself still holds the memory of that night when the Creator wept into the soil. There's beauty in that, because this garden so filled with sorrow is also the site of the greatest surrender in history. Jesus didn't run, he didn't argue, he didn't numb himself, he felt it all and still said yes. And maybe you've had your own Gethsemane, a moment where you were pressed beyond comfort, asked to stay when you wanted to go, invited to trust when everything in you screamed to take control. If so, you're not alone. The one who fell to his knees in this garden walks beside you now. Here's a gentle truth: the word Gethsemane means olive press, a place where fruit is crushed to release its essence, its oil, its light. And so was Jesus, crushed not for punishment, but for pouring, so that light could flow into the darkest places, including yours. You look back at the disciples again, still sleeping. It's easy to judge them. But maybe they weren't careless. Maybe they were overwhelmed. Sometimes the weight of grief is so heavy it just makes you tired. And Jesus, he doesn't scold them harshly. He just asks, "Could you not stay awake with me?" Not as a rebuke, as a plea. He wasn't asking for heroes, just companions. Maybe he still is. You rest your hand on the ground where he prayed. It's cool, damp, and sacred. Not because of the suffering, but because of the surrender. This is holy ground. Not because it avoided pain, but because it faced it fully and still chose love. The garden fades softly now into shadow. The torches are approaching. The footsteps of soldiers echo in the distance. But before the arrest, before the kiss, before the cross, there was this moment. And it was enough. Darkness now rests heavier than ever. Not just over the sky, but in the air, the soul. You walk slowly through a narrow corridor, the walls cold with silence. The world holds its breath. Jesus has been taken, and now the trial begins, not just of man versus God, but of truth versus fear, eternity versus a moment's rage. But tonight isn't about the political theater of Pilate or the cries of the crowd. Tonight, you're stepping into the mystery behind the crucifixion's deeper meaning, not just that it happened, but what it did not only to the body of Jesus, but to the fabric of the cosmos itself. You step outside now, and the cross looms in the distance, not yet raised, but already casting its shadow. And you pause because something sacred is unfolding beneath the horror, something that still trembles in the bones of creation. The crucifixion for most is a tragedy, but for Jesus it was transformation. Not just a sacrifice, but a realignment. A spiritual event so vast, so complete, that heaven, earth, and even realms unseen bent under its weight. Some early church fathers believed that at the moment Jesus died, the veil in the temple didn't just tear, it collapsed the distance between heaven and earth. That sacred space was no longer confined to buildings or rituals, but carried now in open hearts. And then there's a detail quiet but monumental: the darkness that covered the land from noon to 3. Some say it was symbolic. Others believe it was literal, perhaps an eclipse, perhaps something unexplainable. But mystics for centuries have said this darkness wasn't just absence of light, it was creation mourning its creator. One old Coptic hymn says the sun turned its face not from anger but reverence. You feel that now, that even stars obey sorrow when divinity suffers. The cross was not only about punishment, it was about identification. Jesus didn't just take on sin, he absorbed the full weight of what it means to be human. Pain, betrayal, loneliness, despair, not from afar, but within. There's a lesser-known belief in early Christian mysticism that the cross was the axis mundi, the turning point of all time, placed not just on a hill in Judea, but in the center of existence. That when Jesus stretched out his arms, he didn't just reach toward the nails. He reached through time, through dimensions, gathering everything broken into himself. And here's a soft joke wrapped in reverence: if Jesus had a resume, it might read previous occupation carpenter. Last project rebuilt the world using a cross. You draw closer now to the hill Golgotha, the place of the skull. The very name shudders in your mouth. Some believe it's because of the hill's shape. Others say it's where the bones of Adam were buried and that Jesus was crucified above them to bring redemption full circle. First Adam fell, last Adam rose. You pause, let that sink in. Blood didn't fall accidentally. It dripped over the story that began in Eden. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil became, in a divine reversal, the tree of life fashioned into a cross. And here's the strange hidden paradox: Jesus wasn't forced onto that cross. He chose it. At any moment, he could have spoken a word, summoned an army of angels, and walked away, but he didn't. He stayed. There's a rare interpretation passed among early Syrian Christians that when Jesus cried out, "It is finished," he wasn't merely announcing death. He was declaring the full completion of his purpose to reconcile, to mend, to bridge the distance between God and humanity. And that cry, it wasn't weak, it was triumphant, like a warrior laying down arms, not in surrender, but victory. You can almost hear it now, not strained, but strong, echoing through time. You take a breath and you feel it too, that weight. Because in that moment, every injustice, every failure, every fear you've ever known was spoken for, covered, not ignored, but redeemed. And the cross, this brutal tool of execution, became a doorway, not a dead end, a gate flung wide. But maybe the greatest mystery is this: that love could bleed. We often imagine God as distant, untouchable. But Jesus on the cross, that is vulnerability at its highest frequency. Not weakness, but willingness. Not helplessness, but hope. Choosing suffering so you would never walk through yours alone. And maybe you felt pierced too, not by nails, but by life, by loss, by love that asked more of you than you thought you had to give. If so, you're closer to that cross than you know. Because it's not just an event, it's a pattern of giving, of forgiving, of dying to what doesn't matter so something eternal can rise. You step forward now, and the hill is silent. The sky is dark. The earth has begun to tremble, but you are not afraid. Because what died here wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of everything else. You are walking through a place that does not exist on any map. The light is strange, neither day nor night. The ground beneath your feet is solid, but it hums faintly with a sound you can't quite name. Around you stretches a vast gray expanse, silent, endless, and waiting. This is not earth, and it is not yet heaven. Tonight, you're standing in the shadowlands between death and life. This is the mystery of the 3 days. Scripture says that after his crucifixion, Jesus was buried, and on the 3rd day he rose. But what happened in between? Where did he go? What did he do? It's a question that echoes through the centuries. The Apostles' Creed offers a single solemn line: he descended into hell, and from that an entire world of mystery opens. Some theologians call it the harrowing of hell, a beautiful, terrible phrase that describes Jesus entering the realm of the dead not as victim, but as victor. Not to suffer further, but to liberate. You pause. Imagine it. Jesus wrapped in silence, stepping through the gates of death. The darkness recoils, shadows shrink, and the souls of the ancient faithful, Abraham, Ruth, David, the prophets, all lift their heads. He has come. This place in ancient Hebrew thought was called Sheol, the resting place of the dead. Neither fiery torment nor heavenly glory, but a holding space, a silence. The early church believed that Jesus entered this realm not to be bound by it, but to break its grip. There's a lesser-known passage in 1 Peter that hints at this. He went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. What did he proclaim? Some say it was freedom, others judgment, but many believe it was this: it's time to come home. An ancient hymn whispered in monasteries long forgotten says it this way: the gates of brass he shattered, the chains he ground to dust, the grave he robbed of its silence. And then there's the image recorded in early iconography of Jesus reaching into the pit and pulling Adam and Eve from the grave hand in hand, a reversal of the fall. The first man and woman raised by the one who makes all things new. You might chuckle quietly at the thought, imagine the stunned faces of the dead. You're early, they might have said, and he smiling replied, no, you're right on time. But others have asked if Jesus was truly dead. How could he act? Isn't death the end? Here lies the greater paradox. Jesus was fully human, his body died, and yet he was fully divine. His spirit did not cease. In that space beyond our understanding, divinity moved through mortality like light through fog, not stopped, not slowed, just present. Some scholars argue that this descent is metaphor, a poetic way to say Christ experienced the fullness of human death. But others, including mystics and saints, insist it was a literal journey into the unseen, where light pierced places long forgotten, and not just for the righteous. Some bold voices in early Christianity believed that Jesus even offered redemption to the unjust, that his presence in the underworld was not a sorting event, but a final invitation. That even in death mercy whispered, "Do you want to come with me?" That's controversial, of course. Dangerous theology, some say. But grace has always been dangerous to pride. You walk deeper now into the silence of this strange realm. You don't see flames, you don't hear screams, only a quiet like the pause before dawn. You feel something shifting like chains, loosening like old locks unclicking. And then faint at first, a sound, a footstep, a breath, a heartbeat. Life returning. Because here lies the greater truth: death couldn't hold him. Not because it wasn't strong, but because he was stronger still. And not just for himself, for you. Jesus didn't rise alone. He opened the path. And in doing so changed what death means forever. It is no longer a wall, it is a door. It is no longer an ending, it is a passage. And his footsteps still echo through that passage, calling out to every soul, "Come, I've made a way." You rest now kneeling on this sacred ground. The tomb is still closed above you. The world still mourns. But here, in this in-between, you understand something new. Jesus didn't skip this part, he entered it. Every grave, every silence, every place you thought was too dark for light, he's been there, and left it changed. The air shifts again, lighter now, trembling with something you can't quite name. You're standing just outside the tomb, the early morning mist clinging to your skin. The stone is rolled away, but not with noise, with purpose, with quiet authority. This is resurrection morning. But tonight we're not standing with the crowds or the curious. We're standing with the witnesses who never got the spotlight, the ones who saw, who felt, who knew, but were never named in Sunday sermons. The Gospels mention a few: Mary Magdalene, Peter, John. But what about the others? There's an old tradition whispered among early believers that Jesus appeared to far more than the record shows. That he walked among villages, showed up in homes, laughed at familiar tables. Not as a ghost, not in a flash of blinding light, but as a living, breathing man with scars that glowed faintly like truth beneath the skin. Some say a Roman centurion saw him, the very one who oversaw the crucifixion. That 3 days later, as he passed a garden path, he saw a man standing in golden dawn light and simply fell to his knees. No words, just recognition. Others speak of a child healed by Jesus before the cross who saw him again, days later, near a well. "You're alive," the child shouted, And Jesus smiled, not to correct, but to affirm. Yes, and so are you. There's a fragment of a scroll worn thin with time that speaks of two women returning to their village from Jerusalem who saw him walking along the road barefoot, cloaked, and calm. They didn't realize it was him until he offered them bread at sunset, just like Emmaus. Again and again, resurrection arrived, not with fireworks, but with familiarity. You sit with that now. The idea that Jesus didn't need to prove resurrection. He lived it, walked it, offered it gently to those who could bear the beauty of it. One early bishop once said he appeared not to the powerful, but to those whose hearts had already broken. Isn't that how it always is? The ones who see clearest are not those who expect glory, but those who have grieved. And then there's Nicodemus. Yes, him, the scholar who visited Jesus by night. Tradition says he helped prepare the body for burial, wrapping it in spices with quiet reverence. But what if he also saw the living Christ not in public, but in a silent courtyard one early morning? No crowd, just two men, one risen, one stunned. Some apocryphal writings hint at this moment, that Jesus looked into his eyes and said, "Now you are born again." The full circle of a conversation begun under starlight, fulfilled in sunlight. You smile softly, because that's what resurrection does. It completes what was only begun. There's a detail tucked subtly into Paul's writings that Jesus appeared to more than 500 people. But we don't know their names, their stories, their reactions. And maybe that's the point. Maybe resurrection isn't something you prove, it's something you live. Maybe those 500 didn't write sermons. Maybe they just forgave people they hadn't spoken to in years. Maybe they cooked meals, wept less, laughed more. Maybe they were free. You hear footsteps now. Someone approaching the tomb slowly. It's not Peter. It's not John. It's someone unnamed in Scripture. A widow. A farmer. A stranger. And when they see the risen Christ, their first instinct isn't to run. It's to fall to their knees, not because they understand, but because they don't have to anymore. That's the power of resurrection. It answers without explaining. It heals without dissecting. It is. And for all the theology, for all the debate, sometimes the simplest truth is the most profound. Jesus got up. And in doing so, he whispered to all of creation, so can you. You may not have seen the angels at the tomb. You may not have touched the scarred hands. But the same voice that called Lazarus out of the grave, that stood in silent radiance before Mary in the garden, now calls to you, wake up, breathe deep, begin again. Because resurrection isn't a date in history. It's a rhythm, a movement, a heartbeat returning after sorrow. You feel it now, don't you? The warmth in your chest, the hush around your breath, the light breaking softly behind closed eyelids. He is risen, quietly, truly, eternally. And so are you. You're looking up now, eyes following the endless stretch of sky. The clouds have parted into gentle layers of gold and white, as if waiting for something to pass through. There's a stillness in the air, not empty but watchful. And in the center of it all stands Jesus, radiant, quiet, and ready. This is the ascension, the moment the earthly becomes eternal. When the Savior doesn't vanish but rises, it's easy to see it as a farewell. But tonight you're not here to mourn a departure. You're here to uncover the hidden message in his going up. Because Jesus didn't ascend to leave, he ascended to complete. The Gospels describe it briefly. He blessed them, then was lifted up into the heavens, and a cloud received him out of their sight. But what does that mean? What happened in the seconds between blessing and disappearance? Some early Christian mystics taught that the cloud wasn't just sky. It was the Shekinah, the glory presence of God. The same cloud that led Israel through the wilderness. The same cloud that hovered on Mount Sinai. And now it wraps around the sun like a celestial welcome. Others say the ascension wasn't Jesus leaving the world behind, it was him taking humanity into heaven with him. That in his rising he didn't just depart, he elevated all of creation. Theologians have called it the enthronement, a moment when heaven recognized not just God's Son, but the Son of Man as King. There's an ancient prayer that whispers, "You took dust and made it worthy of the throne." You feel that now. The glory isn't distant, it's shared. Your skin, your breath, your story lifted with him. A lesser-known tradition says that Jesus gave final words not recorded in the Gospels. That just before the clouds closed, he said, "Look for me not in temples made by hands, but in the breaking of bread in the stranger's face, in every sunrise that dares to rise after a dark night." You smile softly, because he's still speaking. And then, There are the two figures in white who appear beside the disciples. Angels, yes, but also messengers with a curious line. Why do you stand here looking into the sky? You can almost hear the gentle nudge in their tone. Don't freeze here. Don't stay stuck in yesterday's wonder. Move forward. It's like they're saying this wasn't an ending, this was the ignition. And maybe that's the hidden power of the ascension, not just that Jesus rose, but that he trusted us to continue what he began. There's a rare manuscript from the 4th century that tells of a woman who saw the ascension from a nearby hillside. She didn't know who Jesus was, just a traveler, a man who had once touched her sick child and smiled. But when she saw the light stretch upward and the cloud fold in on itself, she whispered, "He's gone home." And somehow she understood, not with doctrine, with wonder. Sometimes wonder is the deepest kind of understanding. A gentle joke stirs. Imagine the angels preparing for his return, lining the golden corridors of heaven, nervously straightening halos. He's coming back with a scarred body, no less. But when he steps through, silence, awe, and then a roar of welcome that shakes the stars. Because he didn't return defeated, he returned finished. There's also a question subtle and rarely asked. Why didn't Jesus stay longer? Why not teach for years? Prove his resurrection with permanence. The answer perhaps is trust. He knew when to withdraw so that something deeper could grow. His absence created space for presence not his own, but the Spirit's. And for your story, your faith, your call. You sit now beneath the sky where he rose, the last streaks of light brushing the horizon. And you realize he didn't go up so you would look higher. He went up so you would look deeper. Into your neighbor, into silence, into your own heart. Because the ascension is not just a movement in space, it's a movement in identity. A transition from witness to participant. You're no longer just someone who watches Jesus move. You're someone through whom he moves. So don't stay staring into the sky. Your feet are on holy ground. Your breath carries purpose. And the world needs light, your light. He is risen, he has ascended, and he has sent you. The air around you hums like it holds stories older than time. You are no longer standing in ancient Jerusalem or even in the bounds of familiar scripture. Tonight, you are walking through unfamiliar lands, stepping softly through forests, deserts, and distant temples. You're here to witness something surprising, how the story of Jesus echoes in places and cultures that never read a Bible, never heard the name Yeshua, and yet, somehow knew he was coming. This is the mystery of Jesus in global prophecy, the idea that the divine doesn't wait for translation or borders. That long before the gospel was preached, heaven had already been whispering his arrival across the world. Let's begin in China. In the Shujing, one of the oldest historical texts written centuries before Christ, there is mention of a holy man from the west, with wounds in his hands bringing peace to the people. It's cryptic, controversial, but hauntingly familiar. Scholars debate the interpretation, but you wonder, how could such imagery appear so far from Judea, long before Bethlehem? In India, within the Bhavishya Purana, there's a passage often argued over that speaks of a foreigner named Ishaputra, son of God, born of a virgin teacher of truth. Some say it's interpolation. Others say it's divine resonance. But what if it's neither accident nor invention? What if the divine has always echoed like a melody waiting to be recognized in every heart? You keep walking now through the lush greenery of Mesoamerica. The Inca and Maya cultures held legends of a radiant figure who came in peace with fair-skinned light hair and teachings about love, humility, and the creator of all. Some called him Viracocha, others Quetzalcoatl. After he departed, they waited for his return. Sounds eerily close to the idea of the second coming, doesn't it? A gentle joke passes through you. Maybe the angels were less like messengers and more like pollinators, scattering divine hints like pollen across the continents. Don't worry, they might have said. You'll know him when you see him. And that's what's most fascinating. These global echoes didn't replicate Christ exactly, but they carried types, shadows, anticipations. Symbols of a divine teacher, a suffering servant, a resurrecting light-bringer. The footprints of God in foreign soil. Some theologians argue this is the Logos at work, the divine reason or word active not only in Israel, but pulsing through all creation. That Jesus wasn't a sudden intervention, but the full unveiling of a light that had always been there. The Apostle Paul in fact hinted at this when he told the Athenians, "What you worship as unknown, I now proclaim to you." He didn't mock their altars, he saw them as seeds. You move now through African plains, where oral traditions speak of a great one, who would bear wounds for others, whose suffering would bring unity. In ancient Yoruba stories, there's even a tale of a man who was killed by kings, buried, and returned to life in a blaze of light. Coincidence maybe, but maybe not. There's a rare legend from Polynesian seafarers who spoke of a time when the God who made the sky and sea will walk upon the earth bringing healing in his hands. They waited, prayed, and taught their children to recognize his spirit when he came. You pause, because something holy is unfolding in your chest, a realization that Jesus is not the property of any one culture. He belongs to no flag, no tongue, no temple. He is God's whisper to everyone. And what of those who never heard the gospel by name? What of the tribes deep in the jungle, the monks on mountains, the villagers who never received a missionary? Early Christian mystics spoke of the inner Christ light, a spark placed in every soul, guiding it quietly toward truth even in the absence of scripture. Not universalism, but divine generosity. A light that speaks in the language the heart can hear. You sit now beneath a wide sky, stars swirling above you like ancient storytellers. And you wonder, maybe God is a better communicator than we give him credit for. Maybe he's been planting signs of the Savior in every myth, every ritual, every yearning for peace that humanity has ever uttered. And Jesus, he didn't come to cancel those dreams. He came to fulfill them. There's a saying in Ethiopia, God writes with light on the hearts of all people. The wise learn to read it. Tonight you are reading it too, not from a book, but from the very story of human longing. Jesus is not just the answer to the Hebrew prophets. He is the answer to the human cry, the cry for justice, for healing, for love that dies and comes back to life. And you realize something stunning: the gospel isn't just good news, it's familiar news, a divine echo finally spoken aloud. So tonight, wherever you are, Vietnam, Ghana, Chile, Canada, know this: you've been part of the story all along. And the voice of Jesus, it speaks fluently in every heart. You're walking now through a corridor of forgotten scrolls, dusty, faded, many never read aloud in churches. Their parchment curls at the edges, but the ink still whispers. These are the apocryphal texts, books left outside the traditional canon. Some called them dangerous, others unnecessary. But tonight we open them gently, not to debate, but to discover. Because here's the quiet truth: some of these texts hold prophecies about Jesus that came true in ways few ever noticed. You pause at a stone table where fragments of the Book of Enoch lie scattered. This ancient text, revered in early Jewish and Christian circles, speaks of a coming Son of Man who would sit beside the Ancient of Days, judge the righteous and the wicked, and bring light to hidden things. Echoes of Daniel, yes, but older, bolder. It describes this figure as radiant, pre-existent, and unshakably just. Some scholars argue this Son of Man is Jesus, that Enoch foresaw what the Gospels later revealed. You feel it now, that strange overlap of time where prophecy doesn't just predict, it remembers forward. Then there's the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, a lesser-known text attributed to Jacob's sons. In the Testament of Levi, it speaks of a priestly figure who would arise in the last days, not from Levi's line, but from God himself. A priest without blemish, full of mercy and truth, who would atone for sin and open the path to heaven. Sound familiar? You turn another page and find the Ascension of Isaiah, which describes a divine being descending through the heavens in human form, hidden from angels, born of a virgin, crucified by wicked men, and ascending back through the skies in triumph. It's detailed, unnerving, strikingly close to the gospel timeline, yet written well before it. And then there's a curious gem, a passage from the Wisdom of Solomon that portrays the thoughts of the wicked, mocking a righteous man who claims God is his father. They plot his death, believing it meaningless, only to discover too late that he is God's chosen. You sit back, breathe in. These weren't guesses, these were glimpses. But why were these books excluded? There's no single answer. Some were written too late. Others lacked apostolic connection. Some held teachings too mystical, too strange for mainstream doctrine. And yet, even in exile, they whispered Jesus' name. A gentle joke floats, and maybe heaven doesn't always submit its prophecies for official approval. Sometimes truth scribbles in the margins. There's a tradition, quiet, mostly oral, that says Jesus himself read some of these texts. That as a boy in Egypt or a young man in Nazareth, he flipped through forbidden scrolls, smiled, and saw himself looking back. Of course, many scholars caution against this. They emphasize that the canonical texts are complete, trustworthy, and rightly prioritized, and they're not wrong. The canon holds the essential heart of the gospel. But the apocryphal writings, they hum like background music, strange, soft, and persistent, not authoritative, but aware. And that awareness matters, because it reminds you that Jesus' story was too big to be contained in just one tradition, too eternal to be bound by one set of pages. His coming was felt long before it was written, like wind before a storm, like dawn before sunrise. You rise now and walk through the rows of forgotten writings, brushing your fingers along their spines. You think about how many voices tried to describe him, how many languages, images, riddles tried to prepare the world for what couldn't be explained. And maybe you felt that too, that knowing, that sense that the divine has been speaking to you in strange ways through dreams, songs, symbols you don't fully understand. And maybe like these texts, you've wondered if your insights are valid, if your questions matter, if what you carry is canon enough. Hear this softly, it is. Jesus fulfilled not just written prophecy, he fulfilled longing. And if your heart has longed for truth, for justice, for love that doesn't die, then you've already been part of the divine whisper. You don't need permission to hear him. He's already speaking. You sit again and open one last scroll. It contains a single scribbled line. The light will come wrapped in dust, but none will snuff it out. And you smile, because it did. The world is quiet, but not at rest. Something stirs subtle as a breath, persistent as the ticking of a clock you hadn't noticed until now. You look around and realize you're not in the past anymore. You're standing in the present, staring forward. Tonight you're not just remembering Jesus, you're listening for him. These are the lesser-known signs of his return, the whispers in the wind, the subtle shifts in the spiritual atmosphere, the quiet clues that something is drawing near. Not the dramatic headlines, not the fearful predictions shouted from rooftops, but the gentle patterns few dare to notice. You begin with a soft prophecy spoken by Jesus himself. As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man returns. Most people focus on the flood, the judgment, but you lean in deeper. In the days of Noah, life went on, normally eating, drinking, marrying. Not chaos, comfort. The danger wasn't destruction, it was distraction. And maybe that's the first quiet sign an age lulled to sleep by convenience, where people forget to listen, where spiritual hunger is replaced by constant noise. And yet, a few still feel the tremble in their bones, that things aren't what they seem, that someone is approaching. There's a lesser-known parable in ancient rabbinic literature that speaks of a king who returns in disguise. He walks through the city unnoticed, dressed like a beggar. Only a child recognizes him and whispers, "I know who you are." The king smiles, and that child is lifted into the palace before anyone else. You wonder, what if Jesus' return won't be announced by trumpet first, but by tenderness? What if the signs are happening now, and the truly awake are the ones who feel it, not fear it? Another sign spoken by Jesus, but often overlooked. This gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all nations, not just shared, but understood. We tend to think it's about technology reaching the world. But maybe it's deeper. Maybe it's about every culture hearing Jesus in its own language of the heart, not just in words, but in ways. And hasn't that begun? We live in a time where stories of Jesus are taking root in unexpected places, visions in deserts, dreams in crowded cities, children speaking of heavenly encounters in languages they've never learned. Not sensational, quiet, but real. You recall a lesser-known prophecy from the book of Amos, "I will send a famine not of bread, but of hearing the words of the Lord." And perhaps that's another sign spiritual hunger returning. Not in institutions, but in individuals. In people like you staying up late listening for truth, craving something the world cannot feed. A soft joke flickers in your mind: if Jesus came back today, it might be on a night like this, gentle, slow, underwhelming, and half the world would scroll past it. But not you, because you're listening. There's a beautiful image in early Christian poetry describing the final return not as invasion, but as homecoming. That when Jesus appears, all of creation will exhale at once, like a sigh that's been held for thousands of years. And yes, there will be signs in the sky. Yes, the heavens will part. But maybe the real sign is the one in you, a spirit that's been quietly aligning with eternity, longing, leaning forward. Some theologians say that one of the most overlooked signs is compassion, how it rises like a strange bloom in harsh soil. That when people start choosing love over fear in increasing numbers, it's not just revival, it's return. You look out across your own life now. Are you more awake than before? More curious, more tender? Then maybe the signs are already pulsing inside you, not as warnings, but as invitations. Here's one final curiosity in some obscure Eastern manuscripts. There's a line said to be spoken by Jesus after his resurrection, recorded nowhere else I will return, when hope outweighs fear. No one knows if he truly said it, but maybe that doesn't matter, because tonight hope is rising. Not because everything is fixed, but because he is coming. And when he comes, he won't need to ask for identification. He'll see you, and you'll know. Not because of signs, but because of love. You stand at the edge of sleep now, one foot in the world of dreams, the other still gently grounded in this sacred listening. The journey has stretched across time, scripture, history, even hidden texts and whispered prophecies. But before your eyes finally close, there is one more mystery to enter the realm of divine revelation through dreams. Throughout history, God has spoken not only through prophets and pages, but through night visions, dreams sent like love letters folded into the soul. And when it comes to Jesus, the revelations haven't stopped. In fact, they've only grown more widespread. You sit now beneath a star-washed sky, and you realize you're not alone. All around the world, across cultures, languages, and belief systems, people have quietly been encountering Jesus, not in sermons or stained glass, but in dreams. Gentle visitations, words of comfort, warnings, healing. You might be surprised to learn that even today, thousands claim to have met him while asleep, often in places where his name is barely spoken aloud. A man in white, eyes like fire and mercy, speaking a name they never heard before, yet somehow recognize immediately. Many describe being in a dark place, sometimes literal, sometimes emotional, when a presence steps into the scene. Not a preacher, not an angel, him. No introduction needed. The heart knows. There's a documented account from a young woman in Iran who dreamed of being surrounded by water, drowning in silence. A hand reached through, pulled her up, and she awoke whispering, Yeshua. She had never heard the name before. Now she calls him her anchor. And what about that gentle line in the book of Job, God speaks, though man may not perceive it? In a dream, in a vision of the night when deep sleep falls upon men. The Bible acknowledges what you're experiencing now. God doesn't need daylight to reveal himself. In fact, some truths are too tender to be received in waking life. So he speaks when your defenses are down, when your soul is quiet, when your heart is open, without you even trying. And there's more. Ancient Christian writings, often forgotten in the West, speak of a tradition called night grace, the belief that during sleep the soul walks lightly through heaven's halls, and sometimes, if it listens, it hears the echo of the King's voice. One desert monk wrote, when the body rests, the spirit roams, and in holy dreams the Christ walks without veil. Perhaps you've had such a dream, a feeling of peace that woke you in tears, a presence standing by your bed, a voice so kind it startled you awake. Or maybe you haven't had one yet, but you feel the invitation tonight. Because here's the quiet promise: Jesus still visits. Not as a reward, but as a reassurance. Not because you earned it, but because you're his. You feel a hush settle in now, the kind that makes you want to stay exactly as you are. Blanketed, breathing slow, open. And the question rises, what might he show you tonight? There's a gentle joke in some Middle Eastern Christian families. If you want a visit from Jesus, don't clean your house, clean your spirit, and take a nap. But it holds truth. He often speaks when striving ends, when you're not trying, when you're just resting. Because Jesus isn't looking for performance, he's looking for presence. And dreams are the space where he weaves presence and mystery into language your soul can remember forever. You begin to feel it now, your mind loosening its grip, your body softening into stillness, and the world behind your eyes, it's opening. Maybe tonight you'll dream of him walking along a quiet river waiting for you to join him. Maybe you'll hear your name spoken in a way no one else says it. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll wake up with tears in your eyes and peace in your chest, unable to explain why and unwilling to trade it for anything. Because he was near, he always has been. Even now, even here. Let yourself sink now. Breathe in, The journey is done, not ended, but fulfilled. Like a candle burning to its center and leaving a soft halo of warmth. You've walked with prophets and angels, stood in the shadow of crosses and tombs, listened to scrolls that haven't been read for centuries. And through it all, one voice has remained, gentle, patient, calling you. You're not alone. Let that settle into your spirit as you drift towards sleep. Every story you heard, every truth you felt, it's not just history. It's a rhythm, a pulse, a presence still active, still tender, still waiting in the corners of your quietest moments. Tonight you do not chase after God. He's already here, in your breath, in your dreams, in the spaces between words. So close your eyes now. Picture a sky filled with golden mist angels folded in silence above you, a soft path stretching toward a garden where the one who knows your whole name is already walking, waiting. No need to run, just rest. You are seen. You are held. You are loved by the same hands that wrote the stars, stilled storms, washed feet, and stretched wide on a wooden beam, just to whisper, "Come to me." And now you do. Slowly, softly, peacefully,